Hey everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Amanda and I am a disabled neurodivergent woman. I have autism, ADHD, aphantasia, and a memory disorder called SDAM, which stands for Severely Deficient Autobiographical Memory. First off, I want to say, oh my goodness, the last couple of days, I have gotten a huge influx of new subscribers. And so I want to say thank you to everyone who has hit the subscribe button and left so many amazing comments. I am just overwhelmed. I am trying to answer as many as I can, but the influx of comments that have come in has just been a lot in the best, most possible way possible. I really feel like my message is getting out there. I'm helping moms with autistic kids. I've been helping partners of autistic people. I've helped people self-realize their own autism. And this has just been my goal. And I'm just so excited to see kind of like my channel get some momentum. Okay, a little context for this video and this setup, because autistic people like myself love context. And if you're new here and you're like, what is up with this setup? I am sitting on a pull-out couch because I'm recovering from a foot surgery. And so my mobility is limited. And I've been spending the last like 2 weeks pretty much mostly in this room recovering. So having this channel and having all the support over the last week has really made recovery just super exciting, or not exciting, but manageable, better. Let's put it that way, right? So in this video, I want to talk about sensory processing disorder and what it may look like, what it may not look like, and how I personally, my lived experience of it, and maybe a little bit of examples from my kids. Reminder, I am not a medical professional. I am just a late diagnosed autistic woman, and this is my shared lived experience. So, sensory processing disorder can stand alone from autism, but oftentimes it is part of being autistic. And I don't know much about it outside of autism. I just read that as a fact. So I want to share that and put that out there. Just because you have a sensory processing disorder does not mean that you may be autistic. You have to fit other diagnostic criteria to also be autistic. So when it comes to sensory and autism, a lot of times you can be overstimulated or understimulated. And it can change day to day too. Like certain things may cause overstimulation on one day and maybe understimulated another day. That's the thing that you're going to learn about autism in general, is that it is not static. And any autistic person's support needs and sensory experience are going to fluctuate day to day. And a lot of that is dependent on how regulated their senses are. And this is why this is really a very important video, actually, because if we can't find ways to regulate our senses ourselves, accommodate our own senses, then we're going to do behaviors because we get overstimulated or understimulated, actually, both. Okay, let me kind of dive into what I mean by how can you be both? I actually took notes for this video because I wanted to make sure I hit some points. A lot of times, y'all know that I love to just talk off the cuff, and there will be some of that, but I wanted to make sure I hit some certain points. So when we're talking about sensors, when we're talking about sensory experiences, we're talking about all the senses. So our, textures, which is touch, sight, smell, movements, and sounds are all going to be part of how we're going to get our senses. No, how we are going to experience our senses. So, kind of like, I made a list of some things that kind of can cause overstimulation. I'm pausing because some people who are sensory seekers may like this list. So these are things maybe I should categorize as, things that can add to a sensory experience. And I don't know. Y'all love me. Y'all gotta love me. I process out loud. I think out loud. Okay. I'm learning out loud, is what I mean. Okay. So textures, things like tags, stray hairs that might fall down and get stuck to my skin, scrunched up socks in the bottom of my shoes. And even when I get too sweaty, these are all sensory things that can be overstimulating for me. And I think for most autistic people, these kinds of experiences are going to cause an overstimulation and a bad reaction. So, how you can help that is like cutting out tags. Stray hairs are hard because a lot of autistic people will actually cut their hair really short because the hair is so much sensory overload for them that you will have a lot of people who keep their hair really, really short, or they'll keep it pulled back in tight buns or in ponytails. I do wear my hair up in a ponytail quite often, but I like my curls, so I do wear it down as much as I can because I like the look of it, but sometimes the sensory experience of my curls can be a lot. Showering in particular is very difficult because the wet hair causes me to have sensory overload, and all the gels and things that I need to style my curls can also cause sensory overload. So on times when I'm already, so this is what I'm going to talk about too in this video, is how to manage when I realize that I'm already getting overloaded with sensory experiences. Then on those days, I may take a minimal shower and not put gel in my hair because I know the next day I'm just maybe not going to have as good looking hair. I'm going to have to wear it in a ponytail, but I have to manage my sensory experience. And this is kind of important in a workplace because autistic women in general are expected to look professional in workplaces, but when we are trying to manage hair, which can be a very sensory experience for a lot of women, that can be very difficult and impact how people in a workplace perceive us. So think about that. Okay, so things texture wise that I like and can help me kind of balance when I need a texture is things like the silicone is squishy and soft, and I love touching it. I love kinetic sand and rubbing my fingers through sand. Some slimes I don't like. Like find your inner kid and just get in there and find the toys and the sensory experiences that will calm you down. Sometimes my adult brain tells me I don't have time to play with kinetic sand, but when you're watching a TV show or something else, or, you know, if there's a time when you can do something where you can just sit there and play with some of these textures, it can actually help regulate your body. So taking time for these things is productive. We have to reframe how we think of productivity. Because a lot of times when I was masked, taking times for things like this, I would tell myself I'm being lazy or not being productive enough. And then that's just going to lead to overstimulation and burnout. Managing our sensory experience is productive. Um, a lot of people in my comments asked about when they were kids, they like to rub silky stuff. I was that way too. When my mom's told me before, when I was a little kid, I would rub her silky nightgown on my face. So yeah, silky textures, and a lot of autistic kids will have a favorite stuffed animal that they like to rub. This guy that I bought, his ears are super soft, and I'll sit here and just rub his ears. So silky textures and just like that repetitive motion of feeling a texture can be very calming. Also with textures, both you can be hyposensitive and hypersensitive to foods. So the texture of a food can be overstimulating for some people, where other people may crave a lot of texture in their foods. Like I like foods. I'm a sensory seeker when it comes to food, and I want a lot of textures in every bite. If like I can't stand things like just pudding or applesauce or things like that. Like this isn't, I'll go into this hopefully a little bit more. It's not about being a picky eater. It is literally our brains telling us that food, that texture isn't safe for us to eat. Um, Logically, I know that the pudding or the applesauce is completely safe, but the texture tells my brain do not eat it, and I will actually physically not be able to eat it. And I will die on this hill, but kids get labeled as picky eaters when they are just having a sensory experience, and it's just not fair. Okay, sights. So some of the sights that overstimulate me is crowds, which also can kind of do other senses too, like being too loud and things like that. But just even all the movement, like if I'm in a crowd and there's just all this movement, it's too many people, it's just overwhelming. Bright lights, too much color. My kids' taekwondo studio, the mats are like blue and red, the walls are yellow and orange, and like you go in there and it's just like so much color that if I'm overstimulated already, then this can be another thing to kick up our senses and be just overwhelming. Also, very crowded, over cluttered spaces for me can be overstimulating. Even in my office right now, I really kind of would prefer it to be a lot more neat. But I'm right now, I call this my recovery nest. So I've got lots and lots of pillows and blankets around me, and it is actually comforting right now. But usually, I want it very, very ordered in here. And a lot of clutter to me is very overstimulating. But for other people, they are sensory seeker with sights. And so they want a lot of visuals to keep their brains happy and looking at all the different stuff around the room. So for me, want, I often joke that I would love to just live in a like Zen minimalistic, like where a lot of people will say, oh my gosh, how can you live in a modern place? It's just too cold. And to me, that's like, oh, it's just an ideal. Like I can just feel a calmness come over me when I'm in a space that has minimal trinkets and clutter and visual stimulation on the walls. These frames, I go back and forth like almost every day about whether or not I want to take these frames off my walls, because a lot of times I just want blank walls. But then other days, because I'm also ADHD, so ADHD autistic people can have a really duality with this. I want to see stuff. So it can be a lot. Um, but what are some sites that actually do calm me down? Things like lava lamps or those bubble toys that kids, when you turn it upside down, the bubbles go. If I'm really kind of overstimulated, just watching the bubbles go up and down and just like focusing on that can be very soothing. I love it. Sparkly stuff, blingy, I that's something that I like to look at but not wear myself usually. I don't really like a lot of wearing my own bling, but I'm really always attracted to super blingy things and want to just look at them. Sometimes a visual stimulation can also be something silly, like, and I don't mean it in a judgmental way. It was surprising, I guess, more than anything. A few weeks ago on TikTok, there was a filter that was going around that changed and contoured and put this like fancy makeup on your face. It was called the bold glamour filter. If you're familiar on TikTok, it just went viral. And I was really fascinated, and I realized that it was a visual stim for me. Like just looking at myself with that filter on just was like makes brain happy. And not because it was the way that I thought I looked better with the filter or anything else. It's something about that filter just was visually stimmy to my brain. A couple of filters I've noticed will do that to me. Smells. So too strong of perfumes can really cause a sensory overwhelm. And like I will find myself like almost panting because I'm trying not to breathe through my nose. So that can be really difficult. Like certain stores, I cannot go down the laundry aisle at stores because the scents just will give me a headache and just make me feel nauseous. Um, Particularly for me, there's certain scents like the smell of patchouli just really makes me feel gross. Don't like that smell, while other people will love that smell. Um, I mean, nobody likes litter boxes, but I think that if I'm overstimulated, the smell of the litter box causes more of a reaction than it would if I'm more regulated. Some smells that will calm me down if I'm feeling overstimulated is lavender, peppermint, and of course, like baked goods. I mean, I think I think most people, although that's not actually true. See, here I am. Oh my gosh, yeah. No, like I've just had a thought. It's like sometimes when you're overstimulated and you walk into a bakery, because I've been out with friends and like and you walk in this bakery and you smell the sweet, it's like too much. And normally, when that smell would be a good thing for me, when I'm already overstimulated, then all of a sudden it becomes too much. So the thing is, with a lot of these, you have to start paying attention to yourself, and it's going to take time. I'm still learning, but you need to find out when you're overstimulating how to balance it. And what you're trying to do is find a balance where you're not over seeking and you're not under seeking. And when you take times to do the things that regulate your body when you are in a state of kind of balance, then that helps carry over, I feel. So, like, we'll talk about next, movements. So, playing with fidget toys, especially when I need to be listening to something, like in my therapy sessions. I have this particular ball silicone fidget. This magnetic one is one of my favorites. I can listen better to my therapist when my hands are busy. This is important. I wish I had known this in school and college. I used to doodle all the time because that was an accepted way to fidget, sorta. Even then, you would still have teachers telling you not to doodle. I couldn't learn if I wasn't doodling. I never understood why, but now I do. So yeah, stimming. Sometimes when I'm upset, because it was trained out of me, I will hold myself really still. But if I make myself rock back and forth, then I can actually help myself find a balance and find a center and like help calm me down. Movements that I don't like and will cause me major overstimulation are riding elevators. Like, I mean, I will do it because a lot of times riding an elevator is preferable to going up, 12 flights of stairs, but elevators just make me feel very, very overstimulated. And when I get off the elevator, I need to take a moment. Like, you can't just get off the elevator and then just keep going. And that's what I used to have to do, but that would cause me to stay in a state of overstimulation. When I get off the elevator, if I can have a moment to rock or to smell some lavender, if I had it, to do one of the things that helped balance after that experience that was overstimulating, would very much just even a few moments. And then, like, okay, now let's go. Um, Swing sets. As a kid, I never liked swing sets, and now I understand a little bit more about why they were too overstimulating for me. Roller coasters, I won't go on roller coasters. Like, there's no good enough reason for me to be on a roller coaster. Now, this last summer with the family, we all went to Disney, and I did go on some of the rides that weren't like pure roller coasters, and even still, those were a lot. Um, I I could do a whole video about Disney and autism. I'm going to just say in one sentence, Disney is, and for autistic kids and adults, is either a love hate. For sensory seekers, it can be amazing. For sensory avoiders who get like all of these things are more overstimulating, then it can be not a good place. Because see, all the things that are in my overstimulation comment column could be the things that help regulate some autistic people. That's why it's a spectrum. That's why autism is a spectrum, because all of these things affect each autistic person so individually. So for me, for sounds, repetitive noises, that can be one thing that can get completely like drive me so insane and put me in complete dysregulation. There is a constant repetitive noise. It is something that will drive me to overstimulation faster than a lot of other things on this list. Also, really loud noises, barking dogs, the TV being up too loud, loud music. Almost any music that I don't control myself is going to cause me overstimulation. I need to be in control of how long I listen, what I'm listening to, and the volume, which doesn't necessarily work all the time. But if I'm going to be regulated, that is an accommodation that works for me. If I'm in a space where I can't have that, then I'm going to need to use other tools like having my Hear Protect or my loop earplugs, So sometimes there can be outside accommodations like, hey, Amanda, why don't you control the sound of the TV while we're watching tonight because nobody else really cares that much? Or if I'm in a situation like going to the movie theater, then I'm going to put my earplugs in. Now, it's funny though, because on the repetitive noise one, if I'm the one making the repetitive noise, it doesn't bother me. Like I could do this and it won't bother me. But somebody else, somebody else making that noise, I would get all twitchy. Echolalia is another autistic kind of trait that a lot of autistic people, when they hear a sound, they'll repeat it. And there's a lot more into it than that. I'm not going to go into further detail, but a lot of times, specifically when my cat meows, I meow back. And that can be a way for me to like have a sound stimulation too. Like me and my cat will get into a little meowing conversation and it's quite fun. The other sound thing is just pure quiet. Like if I can have a just very quiet space. Also, I love the sound of rain. Like it's raining right now, so it made me think about that. But I cannot stand the sound of artificial rain on like I was going to say a CD player. That would date me. That, yeah. In college, I had a roommate who had a nature sounds CD that she played every night to go to bed. And I slept with earplugs, but even still, some nights I wanted to break that CD. And I wish I had known a little bit more about all of this back then. But yeah. hmm My tea is getting cold. Okay. I have a little bit more. This is going to be a longer video, but there's just so much to say on it. So what it may look behaviorally to somebody outside. So like if I'm autistic and I'm doing these to somebody else who's looking at me, if I'm too stimulated, I might cover my ears. Even as an adult, I will do this. And because if I'm getting too overstimulated, now when I was masked, I would want to, and sometimes I wouldn't unless it was like really severe. Because as a masked adult, I know that covering my ears is very impolite. But I would only do that in extreme situations where I literally had to go outside my mask because I was so overstimulated. But now I will like cover my ears temporarily. Hide. So these, again, the behaviors: hiding, removing yourself, going away. Hey, I need to walk away for a little bit, finding that quiet space, removing yourself from the stimulation as much as possible. And I'm doing this whole video mostly from an adult perspective, but I mean, think about the kids that have autism and don't have the autonomy necessarily to do some of these things. That's why we need to help educate and have parents help look for and help advocate for their kids so that they can have some of these tools to be able to like remove themselves from stimulating situations and things like that. Again, if you're too stimulated, you might be avoiding certain textures or flavors. And for some autistic people, that's a constant, like food is always going to be overstimulating for them. Also, if I'm too stimulated, I'll do a smaller rocking motion if I'm overstimulated. Or not me, but a lot of autistic people might hum or make some kind of like vocal noise if they're overstimulated. And if you're understimulated and you're sensory seeking, you're not getting enough stimulation. A lot of autistic people, this isn't something that I've ever experienced, but it is very common. So I want to mention it, is skin picking. I, wow. I said I've never done it, but there is one spot on my leg that I will pick at sometimes. That's interesting. I have like a mole, I guess, on my leg, and I will pick at it sometimes. I haven't done that in a long time, so that's why I hadn't thought about it in a while. But a lot of autistic people will pick at skin on their face, or if they get a bump. Yeah, if I get a mosquito bite, sometimes I will sit there and pick at it and pick at it. That's funny. I didn't actually realize that I did that, but it is a behavior I do. Um, touch everything. Oh my gosh. When I'm in a sensory seeking mode, I want to touch all the things around me. And a lot of times for kids, this can be inappropriate. They'll touch things that they really shouldn't be touching. They will try to pet dogs that aren't safe. They might see a texture. And this is something that's really interesting that I don't think autistic people could quite even wrap their heads around. There are times where I will see a tree or a texture of tile on a wall, and everything in my body is screaming, I want to touch it. I want to touch it. I want to touch it. And it's not always appropriate to go to that thing. At my foot doctor's, the receptionist, behind the reception desk, there's tile wall. And while I'm signing in, the back of my brain is, I want to touch that tile. I want to touch that tile. Like, it's sensory seeking. Like, I need to know what that tile feels like because it looks interesting. But as an adult, that's a little weird. Hey, receptionist lady, while you're ringing me up, can I go behind the desk and touch your tile? Like, I mean, I want to, but I'm not going to. Also, if you're understimulated, you might find yourself chewing on non-food items. So for kids, a lot of times this is your hair or your shirt. But let me see. So one thing I recommend is buying something called Chewlery, Chewlry. I think Chewlery, and they have so many designs. And it's a silicone that's food grade and it's safe to actually chew on. I bought this one for myself because I do love crunchy textures. This is not crunchy, but like I was trying to figure out a way if I could find like something to satisfy that. It's like a little itch in your brain. It's like I want to chew. This didn't really work for me, but it was worth a try. But it is very popular. My son loves chewing on Chewlery. Before my diagnosis, I did not have a drawer full of fidget stuff. So this is a combination that I've had, and I keep adding to it and buying more to try to, find ways to regulate myself, because all of this is to find a balance, create stimulation that when you're understimulated or overstimulated. Another one that would go into probably like textures is a weighted blankets are often really good. If I'm feeling understimulated, I want to like have a big body hug. Some autistic people don't like to be hugged, but weighted blankets work. Sometimes I really do like a big tight hug. Um, Sometimes I will ask my husband, I'm like, just lay on top of me, and he's like, I'm going to crush you. I'm like, no, I need it. I need that pressure. So I have a weighted blanket, and then it just helps regulate my brain. Can't explain it. I don't know the science behind it. I just know that now that I have all these vocabulary words and these understandings, I now have a way to regulate my body that I didn't have access to before my diagnosis. One more quick thing. I wanted to say some negative framing that can happen around sensory experience, especially for kids, is that I mentioned already that they will get labeled as picky eaters when it is literally their brains telling them it's not safe. Now, nutrition is important, and I do think that it's important to try to find ways for kids to get balanced foods in a safe way possible. And, that's a very complicated subject, but um, trying to force a child to eat something when they're telling you that it is too spicy or the texture is too wrong is only going to do more harm than good in the long run. Oftentimes, the outward behaviors will look like tantrums. One I didn't mention is that a lot of times when someone is overstimulated, they might yell or scream or get really defensive. It's not a tantrum. We're doing it because we're overstimulated, oversensory, and we just need a way to let this experience out. I also cry when I'm overstimulated. It's not a tantrum. It's all this stuff in our body, and it needs a way out. Oh, did I even mention the big obvious one, stimming for movement? I think I might have skipped over that. So yes, finding your favorite ways to stim. In our family, we love doing the chicken dance. So when we feel like we're getting overstimulated, we flap our little chicken wings, and oh, that one feels so good for our bodies and rocking. Um, and negative framing that will happen is people will be called that they're too sensitive, like, oh my gosh, it's not that loud, you're just being too sensitive. No, it's that loud. It's too loud for us. It hurts. Or too picky. So a lot of times an autistic's sensory experience is going to get labeled in a very negative framing, and we need to work on ways to reframe it positively and find ways to just balance that sensory experience. And the last thing I want to say is do not gaslight an autistic person. This one I'm taking very personally. Growing up, I would always say I'm too cold, because that's another sensory thing. You can be too cold or too hot. I would say I'm too cold. I grew up in Houston. I've mentioned this in other videos. And people would tell me, it's not cold. You're wrong. It's not cold. And I was like, I am cold. And what that did is teach me not to trust my own emotions and feelings and experiences. And so I learned to stifle my emotions, and now to this day, I went, I don't know, 8 months with this foot in pain because I have no concept of what is an appropriate amount of pain or experience, because society gaslit me into not believing my own internal experiences. So it can be extremely damaging to gaslight an autistic person when they are telling you what they are experiencing. They say, this is too hot, cold, prickly, ouchy, loud, bright. Listen to them and see if there's a way to accommodate so that everybody in the room can find balance. So I will wrap it up with that. Thank you guys so much again. I am going to answer as many comments as I can. I love reading all of them, and I'm speechless. You guys have really made a huge difference for my week. So I'm not going to get emotional. Dang it. Not that there's anything wrong with getting emotional. Until the next one, bye. Until the next one, guys. Bye.